you're going to look right over here. Look at me.
Okay, hi.
Hi. Would you please state your name and spell it, and then also say your organization you work for and your title?
My name is Ed Reiner, Edwardreiner. I'm a senior wetland scientist with the United States Environmental Protection Agency in Boston, Massachusetts.
Great. And what attracted you about the summit and made you want to attend or present this year?
Well, I've been attending all 7 summits over the last 14 years, and it's a great place to come and see my colleagues and present about the work that I'm doing restoring salt marshes in New England.
I guess as a follow-up question to that, what changes have you seen over the years, or do you feel like there's anything that's become more, like, a bigger focus on certain issues, or after attending so many summits, like what's really stood out to you about the changing themes?
Well, the emphasis on living shorelines has been a change, and a good one, because in New England we don't have many of these yet. And so I'm learning about the living shorelines from other parts of the country and trying to bring that technology to New England.
And what have you found most valuable during your time at the summit, thus far this year or in past summits, I guess? You've been to so many. What do you think what's most valuable for you?
I don't think we're going to be able to answer that one.
Okay. What are you most looking forward to this year?
Well, 2 years ago I presented about tide gates. Tide gates are very important relative to coastal ecosystems, and in fact tide gates basically destroy coastal ecosystem. That's why they're so important. And in New England we have many tide gates because of the history of development, and tide gates were generally constructed in order to allow for the development, keep out the tides. But over time many of them fell into disrepair, and the ecosystem behind them basically is dependent on the leakage. So without tidal saltwater leakage, salt marshes won't survive. And a standard top-hinge tide gate will destroy that ecosystem and turn it into a Phragmites-dominated invasive species, freshwater environment, or slightly brackish. And then there might be flooding problems, mosquito problems, fire hazards, and unfortunate development continues in these degraded environments because people don't respect them or treat them as well as a salt marsh. So that's the single biggest problem I think we're facing in our coast because of sea level rise, and we have new applications for tide gates as well. But 2 years ago when I presented this, we had, the story was that there were 11 special self-regulating tide gates that were installed in Revere. Revere, Massachusetts has the most tide gates of any municipality in all of Massachusetts. And having developed adjacent to low-lying properties and cut off the tides at all these edges of the marsh, they're now facing a significant problem with flooding, with increased runoff patterns. Water can't drain behind a tide gate at high tide. So the water storage backs up, goes through into the catch basins, into people's yards, and it's all because they built in the wrong place. But we're seeing the special tide gates that were constructed are called self-regulating tide gates. And these have a bottom and a top float in order to allow for controlled tidal flow, which is adjustable. So we could make an arrangement, I guess, a compromise between flood control safety and ecological restoration, maintaining salt water to salt marshes, because unless it's raining, people don't get flooded, or unless there's a storm surge, people wouldn't get flooded. So some tide gates aren't really necessary to operate every day, and if we can exchange our salt water, then we could maintain and improve the salt marshes. So there's a lot of reason for that. But the story is sad in the sense that these tide gates weren't maintained. And so we now have broken infrastructure the same way when we started this project, where the top hinge standard tide gates were broken and leaking, and therefore we insisted on the installation of innovative technology because a standard tide gate fix would destroy the salt marsh, and that would violate anti-degradation principles of the Clean Water Act. It would destroy fish, it would just create basically pollution coming into the estuary, from concrete channelized flow sort of and urban runoff just going into the estuary without the benefit of the aquatic plants and critters.
So what are you going to be presenting on this time?
This time I'm changing it up, and I change it up every few years. So my topic this year, and it's still dealing with the same marsh, Rumney Marsh, which is just north of Boston in Revere, Saugus, and Lynn, Massachusetts. And the big thing I want to talk about this year is what I believe is the most important, the largest single wetland alteration that occurred by fill in modern history. It occurred between 1967 and 1969, where a 2.4 mile long embankment was constructed in order to build a highway that was never completed. Governor Sargent stopped the highway going through Boston, I-95 it was called, in 1972 with the implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act and the new concerns that had to be evaluated. There were social and economic concerns, political issues. People didn't want to see these houses destroyed, the parklands destroyed, but they had already destroyed the marsh. So Governor Sargent stopped that project in 1972. And if I recall, a news article in 1972 in the Globe said the project was abandoned, the fill might be removed, and the marsh might be restored. So since then, and the beginning of my career in 1979, I've been working on removing or trying to remove portions of this 200 acres of fill on 2.4 miles of abandoned embankment. And we've achieved some success, but this particular title of my topic that I'll be doing on Wednesday at 2:30 is opportunities and constraints for mitigating the effects of the abandoned Interstate I-95 embankment in Revere and Saugus, Massachusetts. And I have a plan. It would allow for the restoration of the hydrology, because 444 acres of this marsh have been affected hydrologically by creating a dike across the entirety of the marsh. And they only left one opening for all the water to flow to the rest of this 444 acres. And what that does to the marsh is it made a drier marsh on that side, less bird use. The marsh soils are more oxidized. They're probably sinking as a result of that oxidation, so it won't keep up pace with sea level rise. And on the edge of the marshes is a lot of invasive species, such as perennial pepperweed, as well as Phragmites australis. So you have Phragmites and you have pepperweed, you have other invasive species. You even have upland plants growing where there were former salt marshes because of the tide gates in several locations. So people's backyards, which used to be salt marsh, they're now mowed lawns with trees, and they don't want the water. Yet at the highest tides, these people will be flooded. And the real key to figure out is, does this abandoned highway provide accidental flood protection to the community, which some people believed, and that's why it hasn't been fully removed or breached yet? Or is there a way that we could convince people that it's not providing them any flood protection? It's only affecting the normal hydrology of a marsh, and the normal hydrology of the marsh needs the high tides during the full and new moon each month. Without that, you're going to have invasive species and a damaged marsh. So this should be a really exciting presentation on Wednesday.
And really quickly, what is your favorite thing about estuaries?
Well, I'm a kayaker, and I kayak everywhere. And I love exploring estuaries and going into tidal creeks, and I actually take groups of people with me. As a leader of a meetup group, a kayaking meetup group, I do tours in marshes, and I live on a river. So I'm not just an estuary guy, I'm not just a salt marsh guy, even though some people think I am. I protect wetlands throughout Massachusetts. I'm assigned the whole state, as well as sometimes some other states in New England. And so I just love wetlands in general.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
How'd that come out? What do you think?
That was really good.
Now, how could you add